right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about The Wild Robot, a new animated film about a robot who gets lost on an island full of animals, and it's a really great time. And I was really looking forward to talking about this one. And joining me to talk about it, first time on the show, we've got filmmaker Toby Cochran, who has a film out right now called LUKI The Lights. We will also be talking about LUKI The Lights as well after we get through some puzzle pieces for The Wild Robot. Also, a really great animated film about a robot. So we'll be talking about that in a little bit, though. Before we get to the conversations, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, and don't forget to join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. It's a really fun community of film lovers. We keep it closed to keep out all the internet riffraff, none of the trolls, none of those kinds of people. Just a fun community of movie lovers. You should come join us. And if you're not fun and cool, we'll kick you out. But, come join us. It's a good time. And last but not least, I do want to say we have a lot of episodes on the way at the time of this recording. So, just make sure you're subscribed because the episodes are going to be coming. I can't even imagine that we're going to be able to stop the 2-a-week flow of episodes. I think they're just going to keep coming. But maybe I'll get a break sometime. We'll see. But anyway, let's get into The Wild Robot. All right, so we've got Toby Cochran with us to talk about The Wild Robot. How's it going, Toby?
I'm doing great, David. How are you?
I am doing great. It's been a really fun summer of movies, like so many interesting things to talk about. I feel like most of them, though, have been a lot of horror, it feels like. So it's like, it's fun to get into something that's, a little lighter, a little more lighthearted. And The Wild Robot should be a fun one to get into here. Before we get to it, though, it is your first time on the show. So please tell my listeners a little about you and what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me on the show and excited to talk about all things related to robots. So my name's Toby Cochran. I have been in the animation entertainment industry for nearly 20 years. I've worked on things from video games, mobile games, uh, animated features to series, to live action projects and things like that. Primarily as a storyboard artist and back in the day as an animator. And I started, back when I used to do this stuff on paper, and then that turned into Flash, and then, learning 3D animation and stuff like that. But I started my company, Big Grin Productions, and kind of revamped it in 2017 to start working with clients and take on projects to be more intentional with the work that we're kind of putting out into the world, knowing that animation can make such an impact on children's lives. And I feel like animation always gets kind of the bad rap or gets clustered into like animation is only for kids. So knowing that with the kind of outside public's perspective, it's like, okay, if that's what everybody always thinks, let's just be really intentional with the work that we're doing and make really good, shorts or preschool shows or whatever short films that we need to make for people that are for kids, but also, adults can watch it.
Absolutely. I think, I guess it takes a certain, film watcher to understand that, these are stories like anything are stories. And, it's just a different format of telling that story. But, I think this movie we're going to be talking about, The Wild Robot, and your film that's out right now in, festivals and all that, LUKI The Lights, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, definitely share some, commonalities between them, especially with the robots. But, definitely stories that are important for children to understand the world around them and various things that are going on that are sometimes difficult to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I feel like Chris Sanders has done throughout all of his films, from Lilo and Stitch to, even back when he was, working at Disney back in the day, and the things that I think he was trying to push story-wise. But Lilo and Stitch is one of my favorite films from Disney. Like after Tarzan, seeing what he did with the Croods and also How to Train Your Dragons and stuff like that. Like I feel this film is very much his DNA, and I love that
Hmm.
it's got this kind of subtlety and peacefulness to it, and it's got this obviously this charming robot, but it's done in a I don't know, just like this kind of quiet, forceful manner that it just really resonated for me, and it was a beautiful film, and I really think that DreamWorks has a contender for the Oscars to take top prize.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that the reaction to this movie kind of shows that people are just really connecting with it, and in ways both from the story aspect, just to just how beautiful it is. I mean, it is some just really stunning animation. The music's fantastic, and
Mhm.
we'll get into a lot of that as we're going through this conversation. But I think it's a good place to just start getting into it and get into some puzzle pieces here. What do you have for your first puzzle piece for the Wild Robot?
Yeah, I know that the first one I'll say would be Bambi, and I
Hmm.
know that film has influenced Chris on this one, and I was kind of
Yeah,
thinking about it and trying to research a little bit more of what he was sharing in particular. But I know like the artistic kind of style direction was probably an influence in terms of just like having this beautifully hand painted film. It's like the most hand
yeah.
painted, visual development film in animation that I've seen ever, really. And I just love like the bold strokes and them just being kind of risky and pushing that at the studio as well. And then there's a sense of like the kind of there's obviously like there's a coming of age story to it. There's the animals kind of uniting and kind of rallying and things like that. But also there's this kind of reality of maybe a juxtaposition of like playing against the animals kind of being isolated and in nature doing their own thing, but also
Yeah.
like kind of the harsh nature of what happens, and then seeing like how um what's the robot's name,
Roz.
Roz
Yeah.
rallying with the animals to kind of fight back and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as beautiful and fun as the movie is, there's also a very heavy melancholy to the whole thing as well,
Hmm.
because they are essentially stuck and they are, trying to figure out what their places are and how to actually like kind of do anything more with their life or get more out of life. And there's definitely a lot of that melancholy, which you find in a lot of classic animation. I think that's something that's kind of missing from some recent movies when it comes to animated films. I think a lot of them are just so, trying to have pure fun from 90 minutes and just get everybody in and out of the theater, just have a good time. But I think this movie does mix that really well. And I think, harkening back to all that classic animation, Bambi's a good one to put on the list here. I'll go for my first one with Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar,
Okay.
which of course you can go to things that were obvious inspirations for Avatar itself. It kind of goes in a circle here, but just the idea of Roz the robot. She came from this other world, these other people, and once she finds this new family, it's like that's her people now, and she has to kind of fight back against the people who were her original, community or whatnot. And so that kind of taking the stand and this is your new people and
Hmm.
making that decision that you're going to stand with them and be one with them and that's your new home. I think there's a lot of that there. And also, again, I feel like the visuals are going to come up through practically every puzzle piece here, but James Cameron's pushing things forward all the time with his visual effects, and this movie does have a very unique visual style. And so, even though it's not trying to be this hyper real, visual CGI thing, it is unique and definitely pushing things forward in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good puzzle piece for sure,
Right
especially
on.
Roz being kind of you know out of her element with all of that.
Yeah, and having to kind of just figure out how the world works, figure out how its inhabitants work, and along the
Right,
way learns to love it all. And
right.
I'm one of you now, so yeah, for sure. What do you got next?
Another one I had written down was, and I don't think this film got a lot of awesome praise, but I really enjoyed it personally. Was the Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Okay,
Yeah, and I say that just because one, I just loved how kind of quiet that film was, and kind of amount of breathing time the scenes had in there for Ben Stiller's character. But I felt like
hmm
that character went on this transformative journey. Obviously, it was set in a lot of beautiful nature scenery and things like that, and I felt like it explored similar themes to like what Roz was going on, and then like having her sit and just be mindful and observant of all the critters in the forest, but that
sure,
kind of awesome transition time lapse section where she's like learning the language and things like that, I thought was really cool. um,
yeah,
and there's obviously kind of the themes of adventure, self discovery, and the other thing for me on the Secret Life of Walter Mitty was kind of the reflection point of you know what am I kind of doing out in the world in this hustle and bustle, and then actually like reflecting back and just taking that time to connect with nature. And I
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like once Roz kind of understood that and had her own little family, she could realize that that was worth protecting, and then also the side of like actually sacrificing herself to protect it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was actually kind of thinking of including Yes Man on my list, and I think Secret
Okay.
Life of Walter Mitty is a much better version of that. That kind of, positivity and like trying to like find your place and trying to just be positive basically, and that
Hmm.
will lead to new, better adventures and getting more out of life and all that kind of stuff. So I think Secret Life of Walter Mitty is definitely a better version of that, and so that's a great one to include here. Yeah, yeah, good one there, absolutely. I'm gonna go to Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs for my next one,
Okay.
which that is a huge movie for me. I'm a big dog person, and
Okay.
also a big stop motion animation person, and I just think it's just the coolest movie. But for the first section of this movie, The Wild Robot, Roz is completely unable to communicate with the inhabitants of this island, and there's a lot of
Mm.
like silliness that ensues from all that. And very similarly with Isle of Dogs, like nobody can really kind of understand each other, and there's like a real quirkiness to that, which of course quirky and Wes Anderson go hand in hand, but the silliness that comes from that, the misunderstanding and these little furry creatures just kind of having their little eccentric ways and their quirks is something that makes Isle of Dogs just so enjoyable. And I think a lot of the really fun stuff in The Wild Robot comes from that as well.
Yeah, I could see that. There's a just a as lovely like sensibility with the charm of those kind of stop motion Wes Anderson films that kind of play into the quirky characters that's fun.
Absolutely, yeah, because the way that his characters come together, along with his sensibilities, and it's kind of a match made in heaven for me. And I really love all of his stop motion stuff. So hopefully they'll do another one at some point. I'm always down for Wes Anderson stop motion. But what do you got next?
Yeah, I think I'm debating between a couple, so I wrote down a few, but I think the one I'm going to go with is The Life of Pi, in in
Okay.
the sense of that being kind of similar in the theme of, for me anyways, there's a touching point of Wild Robot being a little spiritual, having some
hmm
spirituality, and the sense of the survival aspect of the film, with
Mm,
Rosin and everybody being kind of isolated and learning to kind of bond together. Uh, Obviously the boy and the tiger kind of marooned on that boat in the ocean and things like that, and then Roz being on that island and not really knowing that if she'll ever get off of the island, but also accepting kind of that fate and being okay with it. And she had her mission and all that, but I thought there was a really deep level of emotional maturity when it came to kind of highlighting that. And that's something that I also really enjoyed in the film for Wild Robot, where, I just, again, I don't see a lot of that a lot of times in animated films. And to
Yeah.
your point earlier, it's definitely not like a Despicable Me movie where it's all kind of bubblegum and super fun and kind of
Sure.
on the nose, but there's actual depth to it. And I want more of that for animation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Life of Pi is a really interesting movie. I haven't seen it since it came out. But yeah, I mean, that idea of that isolation kind of forcing these characters to kind of come to grips with everything really, and like,
Yeah.
what does it mean, what is your purpose, why are you here, why did you get stuck in this particular situation, just brings up so much. And yeah, it's definitely huge on Roz, and you can definitely see how Life of Pi would be a great one to include here. So definitely, I like that a lot. I'm gonna go. Speaking of just the more popcorn-y, animated films of recent years, I am gonna bring up Into the Spider-Verse,
Okay.
because I think that just that mixture of animation styles, where it's like, as somebody who, I mean, you being from a world of animation and working in animation, what's going on that screen. But for someone like me, who's just like at the movie theater watching the movie, I'm like, is this hand drawn? Is this 3D? Like, is this some weird mixture? They also did it in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie last year, which
Yeah.
also had a very unique style to it. All three of these movies, I feel, are pushing into kind of new formats of animation that kind of leave you with a big question mark of like, well, what exactly is this that I'm watching?
Hmm.
And it really makes for a kinetic, exciting kind of experience. And I don't know, maybe you could shed any little more light on that particular aspect. But obviously, Into the Spider-Verse and its sequel are so hugely popular.
Yeah. I'm so grateful for the Spider-Verse film and every single person. I think, there's like an army of 1,000 people that work on each of those films. But because of that film, I feel like it's really helped push the industry and these studios to start going in a different direction in terms of the style and start taking these swings of pushing more mature storytelling and things like that to help, get us out of the kiddie sandbox. And that film, its DNA is directly in the new Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem film, because like
Mhm.
half of the art team was directly from the Spider Verse team.
Sure.
Also, Mitchell's versus the Machine, that had a really
Great
fun
movie.
aesthetic look to it as well. And all of these I just feel are like building on one another. And seeing what DreamWorks even did with Puss in Boots, the sequel,
Mm.
that I was just like, oh wow, like this looks completely different. But now they're starting to play with different timing with the animation, playing on like, not everything's on ones in terms of the timing. It's Spider Verse had Miles on twos, and until he like started figuring out his web slinging to get on ones to kind of ease into that, and all of that was playing into one another. And
Can
then
you
to
explain what that means to be on ones or be on twos? What?
Yeah, so traditionally, like say a Pixar movie or any film is going to be 24 frames a second.
Mm, yeah.
And so like on Spider-Verse, there would be 12 frames in total out of the 24. So there'd be two frames held for the duration of the entire 24 frames a second.
Hmm.
Instead of drawing one image per frame for the second, you're going to draw
Hmm.
the same image and hold it twice to equal up to that second.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure if I explained it correctly, but makes sense in my mind, and trying to make sure I share that properly with you. Uh,
Yeah.
like TV animation, that like Fred Flintstone type stuff back in the day, that became so cost effective because they were able to kind of have more limited animation and things like that. So things were drawn on twos or even fours and things like that, where it's just kind of moving holds and just the arms were moving and things like that.
Right.
But
Right.
in Spider Verse, to go back to that example of Miles web slinging in the forest, it kind of it creates, like you're saying, this kinetic feeling where when he's moving, things are on two. So like his main pose is held for 2 frames, and then it
Mm,
jumps to the next one, and then they could do all these fun smear frames, which
right.
if he's in this one pose, viewers can't see the video, but like he's in this one pose here. The next pose is like a giant move in terms of the arms. Then they could put the drawings to smear and create that illusion that the arm had moved over the duration of those frames.
Hmm.
And stylistically, it just opened up. I feel like Pandora's box for like the fun stuff that's been missing for a while for the 3D animation stuff, because I feel like for such a long time now, up until Spider-Verse, everybody's been trying to just make everything look as nice and polished as possible. And it's kind of,
Just clean.
yeah, it's all
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And granted, Pixar's movies are always beautiful, but we've been kind of seeing that over and over. Uh,
Yeah.
and so this was like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, absolutely. And live action, you want to see a variety of looks in different movies. So like, why wouldn't we want that from animation as well? So,
Right, exactly.
yeah. Yeah. Well, what do you got for another piece?
Yeah, I think my last one would be, I'm going to ride the animation train on this one. It would be Iron Giant, to stick
Sure.
with another awesome robot film. There's a lot of similarities, I feel, with the theme of sacrifice again, friendship, companionship, um, the fact that Roz befriends everybody on the island, and the animals eventually take a liking to her. Seeing how the Iron Giant and Hogarth grow their relationship, and Giant learning through Hogarth and having this kind of innocence of kind of this perspective and lens is really lovely. And it's again kind of that exploration of humanity through these robots. It's funny that it kind of takes these robots to humanize and tell these kind of more meaningful, heartfelt stories. But I feel like it's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
great vehicle to allow audience members to kind of disconnect and see that through the robot's
Yeah.
eyes.
I think we
Uh,
might be bringing that up later when we talk about your film, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that was definitely something that we found ourselves doing as well.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is, not that I don't think, well, Roz had the ability to be this destructive robot. The way that they kind of designed the character was all circular, round shapes, very friendly looking, things like that, and then it could kind of transform and have this weaponry kind of pop out and things like that. That 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 I felt was another kind of, maybe they didn't use Iron Giant as an influence, but I felt like that was a nod to the giant having that ability, and then the aspect of kind of highlighting, oh, there is a danger to this world. And
Yeah.
even though we don't see it on the island, and they go to this kind of beautiful Sid Mead kind of futuristic human paradise, these robots can actually cause a lot of damage, and can be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anywhere where there's robots in the world, and whether it's science fiction, the real world, anything, there's the chance for something bad. Like,
Yeah.
it's always got to be in the back of the mind a little bit. Speaking of James Cameron with Avatar, we're always gonna maybe distrust robots a little bit. But uh, speaking of robots, actually, my final puzzle piece, I'm going over to the Transformers movies with Bumblebee, the spinoff from a few years ago.
That's a good one.
Uh, it's a really great movie, possibly better than the other Transformers movies, but Haley Steinfeld stars in it, and she befriends Bumblebee, who's gotten lost and can't communicate with his home. So he's kind of this lone Transformer.
Hmm.
And if you look at this story with the Wild Robot, with Roz being lost, her communicator is broken, so she can't, send the radio frequency back to be picked up and brought back. Very similar to, the whole thing that Bumblebee goes through, and while stuck there, ends up forming a bond with this human character, whereas in the Wild Robot, it's animal characters. But that bond ends up making the main character question where they really belong, and ends up fighting alongside them, as we've talked about with things like Avatar. But yeah, Bumblebee was a really fun movie, and I think kind of got the attention that it deserved as being like, we know you think the Transformers movies aren't so good, but you should check this one out. And I feel like most people did, and actually really did enjoy it.
Yeah, I was definitely one of them. That was one of my favorite Transformer movies uh,
Yeah,
since like the animated version. So
yeah.
that's another film I felt like it didn't get enough love, but it's got enough heart in it to actually carry the weight of the film, and I feel like when people do discover it, they actually they enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll read down our list of puzzle pieces here and we'll get into some closing thoughts on The Wild Robot. We talked about Bambi, Avatar, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, Isle of Dogs, Life of Pi, Into the Spider Verse, The Iron Giant, and Bumblebee. I think we got into a lot of, the important stuff of why The Wild Robot is such a damn enjoyable film. But, is there anything we didn't quite get to that you wanted to mention? Any closing thoughts or anything?
I mean, I'm rooting for the robot this season for the
Yeah.
Oscars. Just to put it all out there, I'm also rooting for DreamWorks. I feel like this is a really big step for them and a big win. And I just can't recommend this film enough. So, for anybody that's listening that hasn't seen this film, please go see it in a theater. Like you
Hmm.
shared, David, the sound and like the scope and how it makes you feel in there is just like you can only really experience that in a theater, and it's just so
Oh yeah.
visually beautiful, especially some of the specific moments in there. I just want to pause the film and just print it and put it on a wall.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous work of animation. So I completely agree with you there. Only other thing I was going to mention, I've noticed this a lot lately. I mean, it's obvious with the Inside Out movies, which, speaking of which, the other movie that's going to be its major competitor, I
Yeah,
think. But also with like Super Mario Brothers last year, and you mentioned Puss in Boots. A lot of anxiety in young characters in these
yeah.
movies lately. There's a lot of like funny stuff of characters talking about death and the release of death and like stuff like that. I'm wondering if that's just like a trend right now, or what's going on. Maybe just people are very anxious about the world at this moment.
Yeah. I definitely think you're right on that. I think everybody in the world, especially in America, with probably the elections coming up, are
Sure.
incredibly
Yeah.
anxious. And I mean, there's some data since COVID. There's been about a 25% increase in anxiety and depression
Mm.
across the globe, and I believe that's from WHO, the World Health Organization, that came out with that statistic. And when we were working with this educational client, they requested our services to help make animated kind of preschool sing along shows to help reduce the stress and anxiety in children, from preschool all the way up to second grade. And
Mm.
they were sharing crazy information about us with kids, not being able to go to school and how much stress and anxiety that was creating with them being at home, and then also the stress from the parents trying to figure out what the heck to do with the kid at home and stuff like that. So I definitely feel like it's been something that's becoming, I don't want to say mainstream, but it's becoming more of a topic, and coming to light. And I feel like it's something that there's like tone there's tones of it in Mitchell's versus the Machine. I feel like
Sure.
Turning Red had a little of it.
Oh yeah.
And I personally feel like it's nice that there's this kind of shift towards better acknowledgement for mental health,
Yeah.
that we can kind of promote that. And one of the best scenes that I've ever watched is on Puss in Boots, and just seeing how the dog lays his head down on Puss's chest, and
Oh yeah.
that
Yeah.
that anxiety kind of subsiding and things like that. And it's interesting to see how Pixar approached it with Inside Out 2. And just yesterday, we had a friend whose child, who is 5 years old, watched Inside Out 2, And the very next day, they were doing all these things and activities by themselves and weren't being fussy and kind of acting up. And the mom goes, what's going on? Like, why were you able to like do this and color by yourself? And I'm like, oh, well, after watching Inside Out 2, I no longer allowed anxiety in my head to have the control panel, and I'm
Nice.
able to do these things calmly. And it's like, holy crap! Like that kid's only 5, and they
Yeah.
understand that, you know.
And I'm
So
just thinking that like we had Wile E. Coyote like
yeah,
growing up, you know.
yeah,
They have Inside Out too.
right.
So yeah.
Maybe that Wiley helped lead to more ADHD components for us, but yeah,
Sure.
who
Yeah.
knows?
Amazing. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up The Wild Robot. And I wasn't planning with that question to transition into your film, but it's kind of a perfect place to transition into LUKI and the Lights. This film being basically the purpose of it, the creators wanted to kind of explain to their children about ALS because the father was going through this diagnosis. I mean, talk a little about how this project came to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Looking at Lights, just give you a little backstory, is, the little log line is, it's a short film about this charming and touching robot named Luki, who ends up finding out he's diagnosed with ALS, and the rest of the story kind of follows his resiliency and how he decides to live out the rest of his life to the best of his ability.
Mhm.
And the story came to us about 3 years ago from this couple in the Netherlands, Sasha and Anyo. And Anyo was diagnosed with ALS 6.5 years ago. And at the time, they were just looking for material on how the heck they can explain what this disease is to their children, both
Yeah.
of which at that time were under the age of 10. And to kind of help remedy that, Sasha, the mom, drew this fun robot character with giant light bulbs in the joints, and then the kids could kind of follow along and fill in the light bulbs on a piece of paper as when Daddy's wrist was going out and elbow was going out. So
Mm.
in the movie, as the disease kind of progresses and it gets worse in Lukey, the light bulbs start to kind of go out one by one,
Yeah.
and visually it was they were able to kind of connect the dots, and it really helped the children understand. And then, uh, you know, in the Netherlands, Luki became this kind of unofficial mascot, if you will, for the ALS Netherlands department. And Sasha started blogging about it, and it started, becoming a little bit more popular. And then somebody was, recommended to them, oh, you should make an animated short film about this. And a friend of a friend had recommended my company, Big Grin Productions, and this is the exact kind of story and the whole reason why I wanted to start my company was to focus on stories like this to make an impact. And so we started working with them in March of 2021 to help figure out Luki and bring Luki's world to life and breathe some fun life into Luki himself.
That is awesome. Do you know when they were first like kind of putting this character together before it had come to you, was it always going to be a robot or did they kind of play around with other kinds of ideas for how to tell this story to their children?
Yeah, they came up with a couple other ideas, and Sasha had wrote and illustrated another children's book about it was called Daddy Dragon, and the dragon kind of being sick. But the the idea of the fact that you can take out the light bulbs and replace them, because the kids were like, well, why can't we just like daddy have surgery and things like that? And it's like,
Mm,
oh, it's the wiring inside, right, that's
yeah.
disconnecting and atrophying the muscles and things like that. So what better way to kind of connect those ideas than kind of highlighting the fact that it's the wiring internally, and that wiring cannot be replaced.
Sure, sure, absolutely. I mean, I think it goes back to the conversation we just had about the wild robot. Also, Robot Dreams from last year, which is
Oh
fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, robots are an interesting kind of conduit for these kinds of stories about things that are human conditions. But it's, I guess, I mean, I'm 44. I mean, it's like, is my point of view doesn't matter. But for kids, like, I guess a robot is kind of a similar, humanoid to filter these kinds of stories through.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how I feel like the next generation of kids growing up with these robots, and then now that we're actually seeing physical production of robots, with like Tesla and Elon Musk and other things like that, um, you know, in media or in these films like uh, Robot Dreams or The Wild Robot or even LUKI, with those are nice robots.
Yeah.
So will that kind of change their perspective on like what they think a robot should be and act and perform and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. When the project came to you, were you I guess even though it is a heavy subject matter, were you excited to be able to like work on a robot based animation for this?
Well, funny enough, I this was my third robot project.
Yeah.
So I was working with SoftBank Robotics, and I was the lead designer for like the kind of human interaction with the physical robot. And these robots are all over in Japan. They were in San Francisco for a little bit, and in shopping malls and at the airport. So my job was like, what is the kind of story connection point and interaction from the human and robot experience? And then shortly after that, I worked on a Netflix series called Super Giant Robot Brothers,
Hmm.
which had these two crazy fun robot bros. And
Nice.
then right after that project ended, this project came to us, and I was like, man, there is something about robots right now. And I'm just like, and to your point, there's just something in the ether with robots right now.
Yeah, apparently that's so funny. Was there anything specific to this story that like you were connecting with like on any kind of personal level?
Yeah, when they shared Anyo's story, I had remembered the whole ice bucket challenge, but that's been
Hmm.
10 years ago now. And my producer, Adrian Ochoa, his grandfather passed away from ALS.
Hmm.
And once I started kind of researching more of this and sharing with the team what we were about to kind of set off and do, a lot of them had family members or friends with some sort of motor neuron disease. And
Hmm.
I was like, wow, this is a lot more common than I think people realize. And what kind of, I guess, in a way, excited me about this was the fact that this has never been done before in animation.
Hmm.
This to kind of highlight this disease and bring awareness to it in a different way, and then allowing animation to really be at the forefront to help tell that story was something that I really wanted to find myself championing that. And then Anyo had some demands for us as a studio, and he wanted it to be educational, it had to be medically accurate, had to have no known language, had to have worldwide appeal, be entertaining, and
Those
I
are
was
all very good notes, by the way.
yeah, exactly, and really difficult to do,
Yeah.
especially making a short film with
Hmm.
no language, and then but that idea, by having that kind of foundational piece for us to start with, helped me in terms of like, okay, where does the story need to go, and what do we need to do visually to help tell this when we
Yeah.
can't rely on dialogue and things like that.
Speaking of visually, what I haven't seen the original like characters that they had created. Was this based directly off those, or did you have some say in the creation of the characters?
Yeah, we had to modify the character for sure, and
Hmm.
that was a little difficult for Sasha and Anya because they'd been living with this character, and it's pretty much their third baby, and so it's like, why are you changing the way my baby looks?
Hmm.
But for us, we needed to modify the design to have more fidelity and subtlety in terms of the performance
Hmm.
and the overall acting performance as well with the physicality, because the original design, like there was giant like Phillips head light bulbs in the shoulders and elbows and things like that. So if the character would ever raise its arm up, that would all interfere and get in the way. And then plus, a lot of people, don't realize like just because you draw something in 2D doesn't mean it's going to necessarily translate in 3D. So we needed to make sure that everything translated well, and we could really focus on the key subtleties of the performance.
Have you gotten any feedback from Sasha and Anya's kids about this?
They've shared that, they were very much a part of the entire journey, and the purple robot in the film, Nifa, is actually named after one of their children. Their
Hmm.
child's name is a little bit different, but it's kind of a fun twist on one of the kids' names. And they got to kind of see Luki grow and develop over the last 3 years, so they feel very much attached to the character and the story and things like that. And they get excited, and they can go to school and share with their friends, and talk about, like, hey, my dad has this, but like it's they explain it all through the robot, and it's been
Yeah.
really endearing to see and hear that.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Well, as far as this film is concerned, I mean, I know, it's already Oscar qualified, so, good luck. Hopefully people are loving it as it's getting out there into the world.
Thank you.
What are you working on next after this?
Yeah, right now, we're doing a whole Oscar campaign trying to figure that out. And I have a couple different projects. I would love to jump into feature and start directing in animated feature. And then,
Hmm.
because my son was just born recently, I've been coming up with fun ideas for preschool shows. And I've kind of got this idea that I want to bring to the world, and just I want to have the number one animated preschool show on YouTube now, which is very
Nice.
ambitious. But from seeing what is out there, I know that we could do something better.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no offense to all of them. For example, like, I love Bluey,
Hmm.
and I love everything about that show, from the color design to the characters to the story and the writing. And I would love to do something like that, but for even a younger audience.
Hmm. Okay. I hear robots are really in right now, so
Yeah, we'll keep it going with the robot train.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see what happens. But Toby, thanks so much for joining me on this. Tell people where they can find you, where they can find your film work and everything you're up to.
Absolutely. People can find me at Toby Cochran on Instagram. I'm All the social medias are just my first and last name, and you can also go to Big Grin Productions Instagram. We're posting all of our updates with LUKI and the Lights, with the film festivals and all that good stuff. And for anybody that's listening that has been affected by ALS, or knows somebody and they want to see our film, you can go to globalneurowhycare.org. That's one of the foundations that's supporting us and helping raise further awareness, and creating activity books, and building out a curriculum for families and children specifically, to help them kind of navigate that terrible disease.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I will put a link in the show notes for that. And yeah, Toby, thank you so much for doing the show. And hopefully we'll get you back again sometime.
That sounds good, David. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about the wild robot and about LUKI and the Lights. Thank you so much to Toby Cochran for joining me for that one, and thank you to you for listening. If you're enjoying piecing it together, make sure you are subscribed. We've got a lot of episodes on the way, and if you're subscribed, you'll find out about each one as they come. You could also rate and review us 5 stars if you want to help support the show and make sure that more people check it out. And follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Don't forget to join that Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, that I mentioned at the top of the show. And last but not least, we do have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, from Awesome Movie Year, which is another movie podcast that I produce, which, by the way, each season of Awesome Movie Year, we have these set categories like Best Picture winner, a box office champ, box office flop, a foreign film. Well, we recently added animated film to our season lineups. So we weren't doing that for the first, like, 9, 10, 11 seasons or whatever. But recently, we added animation. And so now we are making sure to cover an animated film for each and every Awesome Movie Year that we cover. So if you're an animated movie fan, you can definitely check out those episodes. And also on the Patreon is stuff from my music career, which I haven't posted anything lately, I don't think, at the time that this goes up. But I do have a bunch of exclusive music that I will be posting soon. Stuff that I'm not going to be releasing on streaming or any of that stuff, or on albums or any of that. So it's just a matter of making some time to get some of that up there on the Patreon. But there's already a bunch of stuff. There's, I think, 3 score albums that I'm not releasing publicly, but you can get on the Patreon. There's advanced music on there. There's some like alternate versions of songs. Lots of great stuff. Anyway, you can check it all out if you want to support the show at patreon.com/bydavidrosen. And of course, just keep listening. But, I appreciate your support as well in that way. And I got to close this out with a piece of music like I always do. And I am going to go with a piece from the new Pup Pups album. I've been promoting this album like crazy lately. I'm sure I have something that would fit more of the straight up vibe of The Wild Robot, one of my instrumental film score tracks. But, this one, it's about my wild little dog, Harvey, who interrupted this conversation like 4 times, I think. But, I think I got all the interruptions out in the editing. But anyway, this is a song called World's Best Boy, and it is on the new album, A Boy and His Dog and 3 Cats and a Bear. It will be out on December 6th, and you can pre-order it right now on vinyl. And this is just a, pretty fun little silly, ridiculous, like all the songs, but it's kind of maybe the prettiest song on the album. But yeah, it's called World's Best Boy. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
Yeah, he's the world's best boy. He's the world's best fella. Tell me, do you hear what I'm trying to tell you? Yeah, he's the world's best boy, the world's best companion, with a smile and eyes and heart as big as the Grand Canyon. Well, he's the world's best mister. He had the world's best sister. In fact, he still do. In fact, he's got a few. He's the world's best mister. He's the world's best friend. One of the world's best men. I picked that boy 1,000 times and then I picked that boy again. He's the world's best friend.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.